you attention. She does this because she loves you. Love makes people do irrational and reckless things. This is one of them. That does not make it a good idea. You are wrecking Renee's life. It is wrong to do so, even if you have her permission. A few other choice lines read, "You have no money because you keep spending it on things you want. Anything you want is not automatically a magical item. There may be potential magic in everything, but then there's magic in things you don't bother to look at. Things you can have for free. If something is a magical item, that doesn't mean you must own it. It would be nice if you could, but you can't always do so. I had money because I rarely bought anything for myself. Whenever I got some money, I would save it. I am not a money generator and neither are my parents. If you want to have money, you need to not spend it. I now do not have money because I spent it on you. Poof, all gone. You still wanted more, but I didn't have any more to give you. I have been using crystals since I was 10 years old. You are wrong when you start with that "you won't use them properly" shit, because I have been using crystals since elementary school. You taught me no magic. The only thing I actually learned from you was to beware of people like you. But among these accounts, there was one that stood out from the others, and if it's to be believed, it showed just how far the manipulation of Jen's entourage could go. In November of 2005, the LiveJournal writer entered email correspondence with a woman who went by Mela. Mela had apparently known and bonded with Jen in a Utah boarding school, and rediscovered her online through an open letter. Though the quote in the email isn't quite the same, it's highly likely that the letter Mela discovered was the list written by Candy Wrapper. Hoping to reconnect, Mela asked the author of the letter for Jen's information, and sometime after, she visited Jen's residence for 2 weeks. Here, she claims Jen was able to convince her to spend $2,000 on various objects and food by asking only for small amounts at a time. Sometime afterward, likely in 2005, Mela made the decision to begin living with them. Quote, "I moved in with $17,000 in my bank account, and soon Jen had drained all of that on necessities, all for the house, many of which went into Jen's room and never came out. Soon I received a check from the investment company for $80,000, and Jen's spending began again in earnest. I tried to get her to stop spending money on frivolous things, but every time I said no or told her she should spend her own money buying things for herself, she threw a fit. All this time, she was telling me how important I was to her special plan, how the world needed us to stick together so we could conquer evil, etc. I wanted desperately to feel special. I was scared and alone, and I believed her. She knew a few magic tricks, was very good at reading people, and could give relatively accurate tarot readings. I fell for her lies, hook, line, and sinker." Unquote. After she moved in, it was clear that Hojo's relationship with Jen had deteriorated, and she had been supplanted by a new person named Angel, whom Mela claimed was remarkably violent. Jen was now sleeping exclusively with Angel, though sometimes Hojo would sleep with Angel as well. Hojo was forced to stay extremely silent during the day or risk being berated by Jen. This information strongly suggests that Hojo was the one who was selling blood to fund Jen. Their hygiene was also still abysmal. Quote, "Oh, how Jen smelled. Angel was much worse, though. I don't think that girl ever bathed. They just kept adding perfume. And Jen's purple skirt/dress stinked to high heaven. That was until I made her other clothes to wear." Jen, during this time, was apparently made aware of the LiveJournal writer's website as well. At some point, it appears that they moved somewhere new, and it was here that she claimed she was beaten on multiple occasions. Once, during a dispute, one of them grabbed onto Mela's hair and started slamming her head into the floor, while Jen and Angel beat her with their fists, then sat on her and attempted to choke her. Finally, she passed out from the head trauma. Jen would later convince her that she had attacked Jen first, then blacked out. Eventually, Mela would tolerate no more, and she kicked them out. Much like their apartment, the house was left a mess, which Mela documented with photographs. They also had stolen numerous objects upon their departure, including board games, fabric, and a set of corsets, though her demand for back payments of rent, quote, "in excess of $10K, is suspiciously inexact. While this account is consistent with other reports of the group's behavior, there was no method by which anyone could verify the veracity of any of them, instead leaving only the word of the writers. Alongside this, the author would finally reveal the faces of Jen and Hojo. In the frequently asked questions section, he wrote, "Is this photo Vincent/Jen/Hojo? 90% of the time, no. This was Jen in 1999. She got fatter and dirtier. This was Renee in 2000. She looks the same. In response to this attention, Jen and Hojo began to frantically delete most traces of themselves online, and even with their names publicly available, nobody could find them. After this, the attention on these stories began to wane. But only a few years after the accounts were posted, the Final Fantasy house would return in a way that nobody expected and, at first, seemed entirely unrelated. On July 15, 2008, a LiveJournal user by the name of Dragon Tiger Claw wrote a post entitled Insane Housemate Part 1 and published it on Housemate Horror, an open, moderated page where people could share their stories of bad roommates. The opening reads, quote, I used to live in an awesome situation in SoCal until the housemate from hell moved in. Fortunately, she has left, but the bitterness remains on my tongue. It is a saga that can only be told in pieces. Please bear with me. In the cut, you will find part 1 of the saga involving the girl who believed she was a video game character. Unquote. Soon, the author would name himself as Pete. The tale was structured in irregularly sized sections, with many of them ending on cliffhangers. He explained that he was living with 5 other people in a 4-story house. He claimed that the rent was a preposterously low $500 a month, and that the landlord, Matt, kept it that way because his chief concern was that he wanted company in the house he had inherited. However, his standards for roommates were high. They all had to have stable income and employment and be at least 25 years old. The woman who was chosen after their screening process was kept anonymous by Dragon Tiger Claw and was given the placeholder name Sarah, who moved in without much trouble. She claimed to be a 27-year-old computer programmer who already had a job in the area, but when she went back to work after the move, she returned saying she was laid off. When others offered to help her find new work, she consistently delayed accepting it, which made them suspicious. But much more striking was her connection to a particular game. Quote, in the 3 weeks that followed, Sarah was still unemployed. She spent all her time playing video games in the family room. She would play the same game over and over, some crappy-looking RPG from the 90s. It had an unpronounceable name, but Sarah said she was bonded to the game. She also told us that she changed her name to be that of one of the game characters. Upon further discussion, she explained that she believed she was the human incarnation of this character and that they shared a soul. Unquote. Pete refused to reveal what character she was claiming to be, however, since it would be identifying information. This game would, in the second update, be revealed to be the Japanese RPG Suikoden, released in 1995. Soon afterwards, a friend of hers came to visit the house. She also believed herself bonded to a Suikoden character, specifically Sasarai, but since Pete could neither spell nor pronounce it, he simply called her something. After spending a week together playing video games, they picketed a barbecue that the rest of the housemates were having. Though they had been given vegetarian options to join, they refused on moral grounds, denouncing them for eating meat. After they were aggressively told off, they were asked for a house meeting, which took place in March, to discuss whether or not Sarah would be allowed to stay. Sarah attempted to explain herself. Quote, Sarah lifted her head and started to talk. She started with, I am sorry, but you have to understand where I am coming from. She also said, lots of people can't understand me because I have such a high intellect, it is beyond their grasp. Excuse us for being sane, bitch. Unquote. They eventually learned that she had used friends' help to get past the screening process. She had never had a job in California, was from the East Coast, and used a friend's address to get a California driver's license while another posed as her boss. Matt allowed her to stay until May 1st, since she had already paid for April. Sarah, however, wasn't willing to leave so easily. By this point, numerous readers had become enraptured, begging for updates to what they had come to call the Sarah Saga, and many returned daily in hopes that a new part would be posted by Pete. In response to the pressure from Matt and the rest of the house, Sarah isolated herself in her room, with Sasarai acting as a go-between. She would only leave it in Sasarai's company. However, this didn't last long, as Matt was able to pull a favor from a psychologist friend to get her treatment for free, and he managed to convince Sarah to attend. Soon, she was on medication, and was interacting with the others on a more normal basis. It was during this time that they discovered Sarah's true form of income. Quote, she said, plain as can be, I have people offer me donations on my blog so I can spread the news of my religion. Her her religion being that she is actually a male video game character from a game that came out in the 90s. What? So there are some morons out there who are giving money to Sarah so she can pretend to be a video game character and teach others how to do the same? Something said, "We give her things because she has helped us find our true selves." "So you don't work either?" Tim asked. I could tell he was ready to explode. "No, I get government benefits in the UK. "Why?" "Because I don't like to work." Soon after this, Sarah's boyfriend convinced her to abandon her medication, and the results were violent. After one of the ruder housemates demanded she start taking the pills again, she began smashing fragile objects, including a window. She would continue to take her pills irregularly, but by this point, interaction between her and the rest of the house fell to a minimum. By the time May 1st came, there was no sign of her moving out, and when Matt attempted to evict her, Sarah called the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, claiming discrimination against her religion and her disabilities. While the state didn't follow through on these threats, they did discover that Matt had never filed the correct paperwork to house tenants, and Matt couldn't evict her until the proper paperwork was filed. But the strangest event would happen that summer. In July, Sarah gathered 12 members of her soul bonding group at the house to perform a ritual, threatening Matt that she would file a discrimination suit against him if he wouldn't let them stay. Though Matt acquiesced, he only allowed them to stay until 10 o'clock that night. One roommate demanded that the soul bonders be ejected, but Matt wanted to gawk at their ritual, and so they stood in the kitchen and ate pizza while watching them. Pete describes the ritual. Quote, "Sarah came downstairs, dressed in a white dress. She kept glancing at us. Something stood between her and us so she couldn't see us, I guess, and she began talking. She talked about how this was Betty's awakening and how Betty was now going to finally realize her potential by harnessing the soul of a video game character. I couldn't stand it. I started cracking up. The rest of the housemates started cracking up. This was better than any kind of TV you can imagine. See if you can picture all of these nutjobs kneeling around the altar as the video game played its music in the background. Sarah stood over them, preaching this religion, and the right bishop something would occasionally interject something deep from her position. Sarah was really getting upset, so more of her friends made the human wall. We could still hear all the stupid, even after they turned up the volume on that video game. At this point, Matt threatened to call the police since it was nearly 10 o'clock, but when one of the members of Sarah's group threw a punch, the threat was carried out, and the group was forced from the premises. After this point, other members of the house would share some of their experiences, but as they did, readers grew more suspicious. Before this, many people had been doubting the veracity of the claims made by Pete, but when the other housemates began to write in a similar fashion to him, it made them even more dubious. These disagreements eventually spiraled into arguments whose full scope was not archived before being deleted, but they were apparently severe enough for the moderator of Housemate Horror to write a post regarding them. Also in this post was a surprising and unexpected piece of information. Quote, Tim, Pete, and Carrie, aka the people posting from the account Dragon Tiger Claw about the Sarah saga, may be as they say they are, different housemates of Sarah. Or they may be the one person doing a little creative writing experiment. Basically, I don't give a crap. The posts have been amusing and entertaining, and anyone who doesn't think so is not being forced to read them, so please do not complain. Farther down, the mod continues. It has been brought to my attention that a post was made by someone who was claiming to know Sarah, and that the posts made by DTC were false and harassing blah blah wah blah. This same person, Jay Eckhart, sent me an email before they made that post, requesting IP address information on the poster of the Sarah stories in order to catch the culprit making these false and harassing posts. I declined, as I do not think giving out personal/identifying information such as IP addresses on members of my community without their permission is really a good thing to do you? Also, I have no proof that this person is really representing Sarah or that the posts made about her are false. I have no proof that they are true either, but until I get proof either way, I think the best thing is to not take any drastic actions. They requested I not tell DTC about them contacting me, and I intended not to, simply because it was the most neutral action to take, but then they made that post and made their intentions public. So I feel fine with telling you all, including DTC, about the email now. But meanwhile, elsewhere on the internet, other people were having their own discussion about the Sarah saga, and they would quickly discover much more than they first expected. On August 19, 2008, a member of the Something Awful forums named Jabberwock posted a thread entitled, "If you thought furries were bad," which linked to the 11 parts of the Sarah saga that had been posted so far. The responses seemed mostly to reflect amusement, though quite a number of forum members echoed the doubt displayed in the comments of the posts themselves. One user, however, who went by Jägerhunde, had a different response. Quote, "I haven't read through the journals, I only started the first, but I swear this could be about a girl I knew and even once dated in that really vague, sad high school nerd way. She claimed that she was soul-bonded to the Eris character from Final Fantasy VII, that her girlfriend was soul-bonded to Sephiroth, and she swore at one point with perfect seriousness that she was carrying Sephiroth's spirit child. Apparently, she'd conducted an elaborate fantasy life with these characters in her head and had written pages upon pages of god-awful fanfiction about it. So far as I know, she grew out of it eventually, but when I say eventually, I mean like late 20s. Even when I knew her at 16, this kind of behavior from her made me want to stay far the fuck away. Oh yeah, the girl in question also changed her name to some bullshit nerd fantasy name she made up and absolutely refused to ever be addressed by her birth name." After reading through the rest of the entries, Jägerhunde returned the next day with a new post that took the other readers aback. "Pretty sure I've got this all sewn up, goons. Allow me to introduce you to Catherine Rain." By pure chance, Jägerhunde had been in a small writing club in high school with Catherine, and still knew her Flickr account, her DeviantArt account, and her LiveJournal account. They also discovered the Flickr account of someone cosplaying as Sasarai, who had numerous pictures of both herself and Catherine. One of these images credited her as Catherine Silverberg, Silverberg being the surname of a family of characters from Suikoden known for their tactical prowess in war. Other photographs had Catherine in a white dress, something that Sarah had worn in the Sarah saga. But the most telling piece of evidence Jägerhunde discovered was legal paperwork of her name change. By searching for her name in the county archives, he was able to discover her court schedule for when she legally changed her name. Though the accounts of Pete and his housemates were still doubted, the identity of Sarah seemed almost certain. They also were able to track down the website that this soul-bonding community was using to proselytize curious internet users. Another person rediscovered the pamphlets that they would hand out at conventions. Part of it reads, "The runes are devoted to preserving the natural order of life. While it can't be denied that their bearers have often experienced great hardship as a result of bearing the runes, we know that this is due to inexperienced bearers with no magical training, suddenly and unexpectedly receiving the runes' gifts. With no knowledge of how to live in harmony with these powerful entities, they can't control the vast forces raging in turmoil inside themselves. But if people were taught to listen to and understand the runes, we could have the healthy, positive relationships with them that we were always meant to have." The end of the pamphlet encourages readers to contact Bishop Sasarai. After looking through the information on the Final Fantasy house, Jägerhunde made another assertion, that Catherine had also been deeply involved with Jen and Hojo. He believed that she was in fact both Candy Wrapper, the person who had written the list on the website, as well as Eris, the apprentice that Jen had lost. Catherine had also been attending the University of Delaware during the events of the Final Fantasy house, only a 2-hour drive from State College. It appeared that, after these two distanced themselves from one another, Catherine began her own soul-bonding community based on the Suikoden games, gathering followers over the years. Though the evidence linking the two was circumstantial, the specificity of it left little doubt, and this revived interest in the Final Fantasy house enough that new people were again discovering it. On August 22nd, just 2 days after Jägerhunde had posted about Catherine, he made another post saying, quote, "Took a day off, everyone. I don't really have anything more to add, except to mention to everyone that I've become aware that our protagonist is now aware of this thread. Say hi, everyone." Gleefully, the rest of the forum members began to post messages to Catherine, mocking and teasing her, claiming to be soul-bonded to any number of characters or objects. That same day, however, an update was posted to the Final Fantasy house website. Quote, "I updated some stuff to make it slightly more legible. Evidently, housemate Horror's Sarah is not Rain Crystal. This comes to me via the writer of the Sarah saga. If you think he's lying or that I'm lying, that is your own business, but that is what he told me. Rain Crystal's behavior, soul bond nuttiness, getting money for it, etc., is similar enough to Sarah that she is harassing the writer to stop posting his lies about her. As such, I still think she's worth warning people about. I am sorry, but based on my experiences and the experiences of others, soulbonders are dangerous freakos." Unquote. The next day, Jägerhunde had a strongly worded reply. Quote, "This is actually a goddamn lie. Greta is a litigious-loving nut, and it sounds to me like housemate horror dude is doing damage control. I don't blame the Final Fantasy VII house author, since he's probably taking it simply on faith that our housemate horror author is telling the truth. But he's not, and anyone who's read this